Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the council meeting for Wednesday, June the 28th at 10 o'clock. The first order of business is call to order, and the next order is land acknowledgement. So we are gathering on the lands that have been home to First Nations people from time immemorial. We acknowledge that what we now call Richmond Hill is the treaty lands of the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation and the Mississaugas of the Chippewa Nations and the Williams Treaty. We also recognize that we are on part of the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee and the Huron-Wendat. We would also like to acknowledge all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people from across North America, also known as Turtle Island, which now reside in the city of Richmond Hill. We are committed to rebuilding constructive and cooperative relationships. So at this time, I'd like everybody that can to please stand for the national anthem. Thank you very much. So we've got a full house today. Regional Local Councillor DePaulo is joining us virtually. Everybody else is here in council. We have the next item on the agenda is a public forum not to exceed 15 minutes. I think we have the second group is withdrawn. So we've got Hassan Gahani first from 1009-75 Oneida Crescent regarding narrow roadway connections near Oneida. So, sir, come on up, and you've got 5 minutes to address council. Thank you very much for coming and welcome.
Thank you very much, and good morning, and thank you very much for having me. My name is Hassan Ghani. I'm resident of 75 Oneida Crescent. This building, 75, 85, 95 and 105 Oneida Crescent make a small community we living in this area. All the residents of those buildings has to use the very narrow road to commuting every day, get in and get out, and very struggling. And unfortunately, the builder do not care about 1,100 suites he built in this area and thinking about the rapid road so people can get in and get out of any area struggling. Despite only 30% of this suite occupied, we have daily this problem. Before I start my concern about this problem, this is a question I cannot get any answer for it. This road belongs to who? To city of the Richmond Hill or to developer? I can't find any department, or I try to find, but so far no. My first concern about this issue is the safety of the people who are living over there. Every day, I see the people fighting to each other, especially in this top of this road. It is a very sharp curve. Could you please show the picture number 1?
It's on the screen.
On the screen. You can see that you have to stay and give the right to the other person to come opposite from another side. And stop a stubborn driver, start yelling to each other and fighting. And this problem getting worse and worse when the people moving in the streets and make more occupation. That the first things I'm very afraid, sometimes we get accident and make some problem for the residents. It is about 4,000 people should be living this high-rise, 4 high-rise building in the small area. Second concern is some disaster, natural disaster, or fire broke. We are very close to the CN track. Is something derailing one of the car. It's happened on Monday in Saskatchewan, 14th car derailing, and fire broke, or the chemical spill. The first responder cannot evacuate the people in the standard time. And maybe we see some life lost. If it's happened, just I'm asking this question for the person or the persons to design this road, and the person or persons that approve this road. How can take a risk with the self-conscience to see if they make this road bigger and make it like a two-way roads? It's better than they make this road or entrap those residents in like a bottleneck. But I have a solution to fix the problem. Not very costly and not takes times. Please picture number 3. Number 3, please. Yeah, this is the area. Actually, this picture area, I took it from Google Earth. If you see the red area is the existing road. The green area, there is one garage and there is a sidewalk, another the greenish area. The width is more than this road. This road is 6 meters width. But those 3 sections I told you is more than 6. I check it by myself. Can I see the picture number 4, please? Yeah, this is the things I'm talking. This is the hydro pole. This is the greenish area. You see the sidewalk and another greenish area. Just he put it, the developer compacted, and today I start to put the grass seed on it to grow it. I'm not a specialist, but if you send people from the traffic department and planning department with the developer to add some part of this 3 section to the existing road and make it wider, especially in the curve, and people get in and get out. That's very easy and he make $1 million profits developer over there.
Okay.
Push them to make it like a.
Okay. So your time is up. Can you wrap up or?
No, I have only the last things.
Okay, very quickly, because your time is up.
Could you picture number 5, please? And this is the empty land. He want to make a 4 high-rise building and some townhouses. If you see, so far we have 11 high-rise buildings in this area. If added this high-rise building and those townhouses, without any traffic plan to the city, in the number 1 at the and another side of the Red Maple Road is the school, community center, and also the.
Okay, sir, you're quite over time now. So just if you could just, are you okay to wrap it up very quickly?
Only once, 1 minute.
No, you need to.
Can I 30 seconds?
You can have a few seconds, but wrap it up very quickly.
And also there is a senior home.
Yeah.
If you added all this is more populated from downtown Toronto and maybe in the GTA.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So in this forum, we're not going to have a dialogue. This is a forum just to bring matters to our attention, which you've done. So I thank you very much for that. What I would suggest is if you have not already done so, I suggest you reach out to your Ward 6 councillor and I will work with the Ward 6 councillor. I think what we're trying to do at this point in time is get you some answers and some information. So if you reach out, we'll make sure that we get that information from the staff for you. Okay. Okay, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Okay, the second and last person that we're speaking to for the public forum today is Pat Pollock. Ms. Pollock, if you want to come up, and this is regarding park revitalization and its meaning for residents. So just pull the microphone down, Ms. Pollock. You're compact and fuel efficient. So
I know that.
you're not short, compact and fuel efficient.
Good
You're-
morning.
you're in
Mayor and
vogue.
Council. I want to take this opportunity to thank you and staff for the revitalization of Maplewood and Carville Parks last year. Not only are they full of activities with picnic tables and benches, but they have such a variety of activities for kids that there are many more families using them. This is such a pleasure to see. It makes me think that with all the proposed development and intensification along our corridors, we need to include similar activity or amenity areas in these proposed plans. These amenities really do provide health benefits as well as create community. The fact that they are used and are of such benefit means we should encourage developers to add parklands to their developments, not in lieu of, but incorporated within new developments. Wouldn't these amenities help to sell units in their development? And wouldn't these amenities be benefits to families to make our communities safer and healthier? A good strategy, I would think, to promote a healthier lifestyle and good development in our cities. Thank you for allowing me to express my views.
Thank you very much, Ms. Pollock. I couldn't agree with you more, and I suspect that my colleagues feel the same way. So thank you. Okay, the next item on the agenda is council announcements. Anybody for council announcements? Councillor Tree?
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Actually, this year is marked as the Chinese Exclusion Act 100 years. So last week there was a big rally in a capital of our country in Ottawa. Around 4,000 people joined this rally. Hopefully, and we're going to remember the history, reflect history, and we prevent any similar situation happening in our country again. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. Just to let individuals know who might be watching in this evening who live in the area of Kozak Park, it will be going through a revitalization. We will be having a Zoom meeting this evening to actually provide more details about the revitalization. Comment period will be open until July 12th in regards to that revitalization. All this information is on our website. However, if you wanted to join in the meeting this evening via Zoom, you could certainly contact my office, in particular, my executive assistant, Nikki Sabet, and she will make sure that she can get you a link to that meeting this evening. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for announcements? Regional Local Councillor Deputy Mayor Chan.
Thank you. It's not actually about an announcement for myself or what's happened last week, but I thought it would be mentioned. July the 1st is coming up. Celebrate with Richmond Hill 150th anniversary on July 1st, Richmond Green. I believe we start at noon all the way to the late evening. My understanding is that there will be a welcoming ceremony from all of us, Mayor West and all of us, 7:30 p.m. And probably you can see, hopefully, that where they will be cooperating, fireworks. So if you're looking for enjoyment, no entertainment, go nowhere else but Richmond Green on July the 1st. Our staff been working very hard, and I'm sure my colleagues will be there to greet you and have fun. July 1st, Canada's birthday, also 150th anniversary, one of the celebration the city has been doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, just a couple of things. I did want to say one of the big things that happened yesterday was the town of the town of Toronto, City of Toronto, had their election on, and Olivia Chow was the winner. That was quite an accomplishment, given that there were 102 candidates, including a dog, I understand, that actually was in the running. But I do want to offer my sincere congratulations to the City of Toronto for that. And I understand that the voter turnout was quite high in that election. And I think that's a big congratulations to the citizens of Toronto, and certainly a good role model for us in any of the elections that we have. I also did want to give a shout out to our clerk for helping out in his role and with I understand a number of other clerks from other areas within the GTA for coming together and helping with that election. So thank you, Mr. Clerk, and your team for that. But big congratulations to Mayor-elect Chow, and we look forward in Richmond Hill to be working closely with her. And I certainly look forward to getting to know her and working with her on the Ontario Big City Mayors Caucus. I do want to say that Canadian Multiculturalism Day was yesterday on June the 27th. I think it's really important to celebrate and appreciate our diversity, and that certainly is one of our very big strengths here in Richmond Hill, and we're working hard to make sure that we're leveraging all that strength in everything that we do. And I think it's also a day to reaffirm our commitment to equity, inclusion, and respecting others' differences, and not only respecting it, but celebrating others' differences as well. So I also wanted to just mention that yesterday, Deputy Mayor Chan and I were at the Collision Conference. The Collision Conference is downtown. It is an enormous gathering of all the high-tech people, people who are way cooler than me for sure. And it's known as the Olympics of Tech. So we made a couple of announcements. One of them, I had the honor of welcoming Mary Electronics to Richmond Hill, opening up their head office in our great city. Mary Electronics is headquartered in Taiwan and 18 locations throughout the world, including China, the United States, Singapore, Thailand, and right now, right here in Richmond Hill. They're actually a really interesting company that produce a broad range of really outstanding audio equipment and produce components for many of the big names in audio. And I also just wanted to give another shout out, as I did yesterday, to Canada Computers, who has seen fit to make their head office right here in Richmond Hill too. And that we did the groundbreaking on that a number of months ago, and they are well on their way to completing their 151,000 square foot building in our business park. And apparently they're actually ahead of schedule on construction, which is fairly miraculous. So I wanted to welcome them and their continued commitment to Richmond Hill as well. And I also was able to give a little update on the CLIck initiative with OCAD-U, eCampus Ontario and Richmond Hill. And it is a really exciting program that we're offering to support businesses in partnership with eCampus Ontario and OCAD-U. And we're starting to see results from that initiative. So congratulations to everybody involved in that. And last but not least, as Deputy Mayor Chan said, we have Canada Day coming up at Richmond Green. I can't remember exactly when it starts, but it's in the afternoon, I think. Sorry, what time? 12 o'clock. Okay. I didn't want to misstate that, but it starts at noon. It's a full day of activities. It really is a celebration of our community, our country. And this year, especially, it'll be particularly great with Richmond Hill's 150th anniversary, and all culminating in fireworks at the end of the day. So I encourage everybody to come out. It's an award-winning event, and it's even more award-winning when we have everybody in the community come out and celebrate together. So those are the announcements for me. So seeing no other announcements, we will move on. The first item then after that is introduction of emergency or time-sensitive matters. Anybody feeling time-sensitive? Okay. The next item is adoption of the agenda. So can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Councillor Silovitz, Councillor Thompson, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries unanimously. Disclosures of pecuniary interest or the general nature thereof. Seeing none, Mr. Clerk. So we have one council meeting minutes on June the 14th, and I'd like a motion to adopt that, please. Counselor Davidson, Counselor Tree, all those in favor? Opposed, that carries unanimously. All right, so we've got identification of items requiring separate discussion. Counselor Shu.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to pull out 15.4.1 for separate discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Counselor Shu. Counselor Thompson.
Yes, I'd also like to pull out item 15.4.3 for very brief discussion.
Okay. Okay, any other items to be pulled? We've got we have one presentation by the clerk, but other than that, I think everything else can go on consent. Okay, seeing no others, so we need a motion to adopt the rest. Regional Local Councillor Deputy Mayor Chan, Councillor Silovitz, all those in favor? Okay, opposed, that carries unanimously. So that means that everything on our consent sheet, 9.1, 15.1 to 15.4, 15.4.2, and then 15.4.4 to 15.4.9, we've adopted. The bylaws we will hold. Okay. And okay, that's great. All right. So, did we vote on that? Yeah, we did, right? Okay, good. So long ago. All right. So we have no public hearings today. We have a presentation by our clerk, Stephen Hike. So Mr. Hike, over to you. And this is on the legislative services in respect to the strong mayor powers that have recently been announced by the provincial government.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, members of council. I'm happy to be here today to give a presentation on the strong mayor powers. Next slide, please. The purpose of my presentation today is, as council is probably aware, the government of Ontario made an announcement about a week and a half ago that they were going to extend strong mayor powers to a number of municipalities in Ontario, including Richmond Hill. So I thought it would be a very good idea to provide council a high-level overview of the strong mayor powers as they exist. And I say high level because this is very new legislation. It's very complex legislation, subject to regulations, and there's a lot of learning that's going to have to take place. So I will do my best in this presentation to give a high-level overview. I'm not going to talk about the merits of, or one might say the political science arguments about the strong mayor powers, because the bill is law. And at this juncture, my role is to ensure that we're implementing, not to get into the merits, of these things. So in addition to providing a high-level overview, I'm going to give you a high-level overview of some of the steps that staff will be taking over the next few months to try to ensure that we are aligning our processes, our bylaws and policies with these rules, because the rules exist and there is no mechanism to opt out of the rules. And even if we never really use them per se, if the mayor never uses them, if they don't get used, we still have to make sure that we are following the rules. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. In 2022, Bill 3, the Strong Mayor and Building Homes Act, received royal assent. Bill 3 created Part 6.1 of the Municipal Act, which are the strong mayor powers. There was a refinement or an amendment to those rules that came into effect when Bill 39 received royal assent on December 8th, 2022. Next slide, please. I think we can break the strong mayor powers down into three broad categories. There's the legislative powers. These are, of course, the ones that have probably been talked most about in the media, the veto powers. But there's administrative powers too. These relate to things like appointing a city manager. And there's also financial powers, including the duty and responsibility to present a budget and to approve a budget for a municipality. I'll point out right at the start here that under the strong mayor powers, the mayor cannot delegate the legislative or financial powers to anyone, but the mayor can delegate the administrative powers. Next slide, please. So the first category of strong mayor powers, the legislative powers, are tied to the provincial priorities. So the government has defined what the provincial priorities are in Ontario Regulation 5820. And it says that those priorities are firstly to building 1.5 million homes or residential units by December 31st, 2031. And point two is constructing or maintaining infrastructure to support the housing that is being built. So that includes transit roads, utilities, and servicing. Next slide, please. So tied to those provincial priorities, the strong mayor powers give mayors veto powers over certain bylaws under the Municipal Act, the Planning Act, and any other legislation that may be put forth in regulation. And currently, the regulation prescribes the Development Charges Act as an act that is subject to the veto powers. But the veto can only be used when the mayor is of the opinion that all or part of a bylaw would interfere with those provincial priorities that I mentioned in the previous slide. Next slide, please. Now, if a veto is ever going to be used, there's a process that has to be followed. So at today's meeting, of course, the council is going to vote on bylaws at the end of the meeting to adopt those bylaws. If the strong mayor powers were in effect, and they're not until July 1st, the mayor would, under the rules, have 2 days which to decide whether he may be going to veto the bylaws or not veto the bylaws. And that's done by notice. So the mayor can provide notice to the clerk of an intention to possibly veto the bylaws. This puts the bylaw essentially on hold. And then within 14 days of that council meeting, the mayor then would have the option to decide whether they're going to approve the bylaw or actually veto the bylaw in writing with reasons. Next slide, please. So then within 21 days of receiving that veto notice, which by the way, upon receipt by a clerk, it actually has to be sent to members of council and posted publicly. Within 21 days of receiving a veto notice from the clerk, council can override that veto on a 2/3 vote. That takes place in the context of a council meeting. So our best understanding of how that would happen right now is that if the veto was ever to be used and council wanted override, you would put a member's motion on the agenda within the 21 days or have a special meeting called for that purpose. Next slide, please. The veto power is, of course, the one that has been talked about most. But what is probably most interesting is that the way the legislation is written, and you saw the definition of provincial priorities, they're very broadly defined. And there is essentially a potential that the mayor's approval of bylaws tied to the provincial priority is always required, or it's going to change the deemed passage dates of those bylaws. So 2 municipalities in Ontario currently have the strong mayor powers, Ottawa and Toronto. And to ensure compliance with the strong mayor powers, the mayor of those cities is signing a form after every meeting that says, I approve the bylaws. It's just a simple letter, because no one quite knows how this is all going to play out. We don't know how broadly that approval is required for bylaws, if it's very narrow, if it's very wide. So we're learning. But I need to make you aware that in order to ensure that we are complying with the strong mayor powers, we're going to be asking the mayor after July 1st to just be signing a letter saying, I approve these bylaws, so we can calculate deemed dates. It's a form that's being used in every the municipalities. And I can tell you the other clerks who are taking on these powers in their municipalities or on behalf of their mayor, we're all looking at doing this. So I wanted you to be aware of this because we're going to have to post these on the city's website because we have to make them publicly available. And if a question's ever asked, well, what do you mean the mayor's approving the bylaw? He signs it, first of all, yes. Well, he signs the bylaw as the chair of the meeting. But because these strong mayor powers are tied to very broadly defined provincial priorities, we want to make sure that we are aligning ourselves. So we're going to have something on file to say yes. Notwithstanding the strong mayor powers, yes, the bylaw has been approved. So next slide, please. So I'm going to talk a bit about the administrative powers, and those are the ones that I said could be delegated. The administrative powers under the strong mayor powers apply to committees firstly. So under the strong mayor powers, a mayor has the power to establish or dissolve committees, to appoint the chair or vice chair of the committees, and to assign functions to the committee. In other words, like a terms of reference. The regulations say that that only applies to committees whose members are solely members of council. So the way the regulations are written right now, the power to establish committees does not apply to things like our Heritage Committee, our Accessibility Advisory Committee, because they include citizen members. It also doesn't apply to local boards at this time. And I'd say at this time because the legislation, the act says that the government by regulation can extend those power to local boards. So for our purposes right now, based on the legislation and the regulations, the strong mayor powers apply to the appointment of essentially like committees of the whole or any of the committees where the membership is only members of council, does not include any citizen members. And the mayor can delegate the authority to establish committees and appoint chairs to council. Next slide, please. One of the other, and I've lumped them here together because they are lumped together within our administrative structure. The strong mayor powers give the authority to appoint a city manager to the mayor. So as council's aware, the current city manager is appointed by bylaw, enacted by council. Well, under the strong mayor powers, the appointment of a city manager is now the purview of the mayor, but the mayor, of course, can actually delegate that. The mayor also has, under the strong mayor powers, or as of July 1st, would have the power to set the organizational structure of a municipality. So that's how do we set our operations and to appoint the heads of the divisions or the departments. Well, interestingly enough, in our organizational structure, that's a power that council has delegated to the city manager. But under the new strong mayor powers, this is how it's structured, but there's an ability to delegate those functions. Next slide, please. And I said that the mayor has the ability to, under the strong mayor powers, to set the organizational structure and to, deal with the employment related matters of the heads of those divisions. But the strong mayor powers specifically exclude the appointment of statutory officers. So council under the strong mayor powers retains the authority to appoint the statutory officers shown there on your screen that are relevant to Richmond Hill. So once again, to reiterate, the administrative powers related to organizational structure and the city manager can be delegated to council or the city manager. That is, there is a provision that allows it to be delegated. Next slide, please. So this is probably, the financial powers is probably one that has actually been talked about the least. And I think it's because everyone's trying to understand what this means. Under the strong mayor powers, the mayor is assigned with the powers and duties with respect to proposing and adopting a budget. So under part 6.1 of the Municipal Act, if the strong mayor powers apply, council is no longer the approval authority for budgets. There's a process that's defined that actually puts it back in council's hand, but it's very complicated. So I'm going to say that, the regulation says that a mayor is required to provide a proposed budget to members of council, the clerk, and the public by February 1st of each year. If the mayor does not do that, then council is required to prepare and adopt a budget. But how does this work, preparing and adopting a budget? This is a question that very much remains in staff's mind. But I can tell you that under the legislation, it says that the mayor is responsible for proposing and adopting a budget. Next slide, please. There is a process in the regulations that essentially gives council some of a say in the budget. So assuming a mayor has proposed a budget and provided it to members of council, the public and the clerk before February 1st, within 30 days of that proposal being provided, council can pass resolutions amending that budget. Council can also pass a resolution to shorten that 30 days. So if the mayor were, let's assume a mayor was to put a budget on February 1st. To be considered, or council is going to consider it a council meeting, 5 days later. Council at that meeting could pass a resolution saying, yep, that's it. We're going to deal with it today. We're not going to wait the full 30 days. We're going to be done with it. But these are very complicated rules we're still trying to work, but I want you to be aware that there's a process in the regulation that talks about council has the right to amend the proposed budget within 30 days. Now, of course, I talked about the legislative powers. If council passes an amendment to the budget, there is a veto process. So the mayor can override that amendment, but then council can override the override on a 2/3 vote. Next slide, please. Now, the one thing I can say with absolute certainty, and there's not a lot I can say with absolute certainty about these rules because they're very new, is that all strong mayor powers have to be exercised in writing. So, the mayor can't think it and make it happen. And we have to make those decisions public, which is a good thing. That's the accountability and transparency piece. And if you're to look at the city of Ottawa or city of Toronto, they have a web page on their website dedicated to mayoral decisions, and we will be doing the same here in Richmond Hill. Next slide, please. So, assuming the regulation is passed, and I checked again this morning, and the regulation extending the strong mayor powers to Richmond Hill has not yet been posted, at least on the government site. It may have been filed. Assuming it passes, and I have no reason to believe that it's not going to, as of July 1st, Part 6.1 of the Act applies to Richmond Hill. And as I said at the beginning, we can't simply opt out of these rules. There's no mechanism to opt out of those rules. We also can't fetter those rules. We can't fetter legislative rules. We can't pass policies and procedures to say, no, they don't apply here. So we can't do any of that. So what we have to do is ensure that our bylaws, policies, and procedures are aligned to this, even if the powers are never used. For instance, legislative power of veto is never used. Even if, the mayor, and you'll see my next slide about delegations, retains or delegates things as permitted, we have to make sure our processes are aligned, even if only on paper. This is very important. And we have to make sure that our actions in respect to that are made public on the website. Next slide, please. So I can tell you that I have met with the mayor to talk about these powers. And the mayor has very clearly indicated to me that he wants the status quo, our administrative processes and practices, to be maintained as much as possible. So the first thing I can tell you is that the mayor has directed me or asked me to prepare a mayoral decision to delegate the authority to establish committees to appoint chairs and vice chairs to council. That's what our process is today. But we're going to have it on paper. We're going to have a signed decision to make sure that we know that that is being maintained. He's also directed me or asked me to prepare a mayoral decision to appoint and to delegate to council the authority to appoint a city manager. That is the status quo being maintained. And he's actually asked me also to set up a mayoral decision delegating the organizational structure to the city manager. That's maintaining the status quo because the city manager's current bylaw says that she's responsible for the organizational structure and for the hiring of department heads. So these decisions, we'll have these mayoral decisions. We're going to call them mayoral decisions, and we're going to apply tracking numbers, and we're going to post these on the website. We will work with the mayor to get them signed next week once the powers are in effect, to get them up on the website. Next slide, please. And then the other thing we're going to do is over the summer, staff are going to be working diligently to look at policies and procedures and practices to see where we need to bring things into conformity with the strong mayor rules, if we need to account for them in our policies and procedures. One of the very important areas that we'll be looking at, and this was the mayor had asked us very specifically, is to ensure that while council is technically not responsible for adopting a budget, that they have a very meaningful role to play in the approval of this budget. So we want to, but we have to look at how we're going to do that to align our processes with these new rules. And so we will be reporting back in the fall. It could be one report, could be a few reports dealing with some of these issues and making recommendations. I can tell you that the mayor and I were chatting. Our procedure bylaw is going to need a bunch of updates as a result of this. But as I've mentioned to council before, we were going to do a thorough review of our procedure bylaw. What we targeted for the fall, we'll incorporate that into that as well. So, so there'll be a lot more work to do on this because it's very complicated legislation. It's new. And so next slide, please. That's my presentation. Simple recommendations just to receive for information, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Okay, I think we're done. Thanks very much. Motion to adjourn. All righty then. So in no particular order. Just give me a second here. Councillor Davidson, Thompson, who else? Shu, Deputy Mayor Chan, Councillor Silovitz. No, I've got you, Councillor Shu. Oh, Joe's got his hand up there. 6. Okay. Yeah, I got it. All right. And Councillor Tree, you're going to stay silent for now. Councillor Liu, you're good. Okay. All right. We'll reserve the right to add you. I'll speak at the end, but I will say thank you very much, Stephen, for, I feel when I heard that this was all going to happen, and we've been hearing about this for quite some time, I thought, well, okay, fine. You know, it's not going to be that complicated, but this is like dropping a big ball of wool on the floor and then trying to untangle it later. And I realized that you and all the other municipalities, I guess it's 27 others, are looking to Ottawa and Toronto to figure out what they did and what works. So I appreciate the collaboration because I think that'll make it easier. But I think you presented our conversations well in your presentation. So I'll elaborate on it a little bit later, but I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on this. It's a big change, although I think, you know, the main goal that we all have is to build our community and make a great community. You know, we can't ignore this, but the goal doesn't change. So, and I think that's the important thing that I have to keep reminding myself. So, Councillor Davidson, go ahead.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for trying to untangle this. My first question is, the backstop to all of this sort of concentrated power for the mayor seems to be 2/3 of the council can vote to challenge some of these things, right? So assuming the mayor's not part of that 2/3, that means what's 2/3 of 8? I have it as 5.28 people. Does that mean we need 5 out of 8 or 6 out of 8? What is 2/3 of 8?
Actually, the mayor is part of it.
Oh,
the mayor
yes.
is entitled to vote on any motion to override a veto.
So the mayor gets to vote
Yes.
on himself. Okay.
But the question about the 5 out of 8 is if it's 5.2, you always go up to the next whole number.
Well, in math, they go down, but anyway.
No, but because you're dealing with people,
Yeah.
you don't have 0.2 of a people and you can't cut a person in half. So you have to go up.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, assuming if it ever came into play that this council wanted to challenge a veto by the mayor, we would need 6 out of 9.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I don't know if you can answer this question, but through you, Mr. Mayor, what possible scenario do you see that these mayoral powers would help us build houses faster? Is that too in the weeds with the policy? Because I honestly mentally can't make that connection.
We answer that.
Through the mayor, I really couldn't answer that. I think this is very new. As the mayor said, you know, this is entirely new governance structure and stuff. I couldn't possibly opine on the political science arguments related to that.
Interestingly enough, if I may, there's very little evidence about this because as far as I know, Ottawa basically opted out of all of this stuff. And it's only a brief period of Toronto that, so there isn't a lot of experience here. But I think this, I'm not suggesting, I'm not going to, like the lines I'll leave blurry in this discussion, but this is not really a discussion on the merits of this legislation. I mean, I have concerns about it too, but, I don't know the answer to that, to be honest with you.
Okay, thank you. And through you, Mr. Mayor, the last question I have is, there's nothing in the legislation to say that the mayor can't be guided by council and then he can make his own decisions, either go rogue or possibly follow the vibe of council. Is that sort of the spirit of, you think that's the spirit of how this might work in this particular council?
Through the mayor, respectfully, I can only really deal in facts. It wouldn't be good for me to start supposing how this might work amongst people and individuals. I certainly, I can say that as a person responsible for governance, I think I would hope that would be the way it would work, but that's pretty much up to the individuals who are sitting up there on the council bench.
Thank you. And one last question through you, Mr. Mayor. I guess what I'm asking is, we'll still get budget as a group, as a council, we'll still get the budget presented. We'll still have the discussions about the big decisions here. We'll still get to ask questions. Where does it go from there when we have the budget presented and we're supposed to vote on it or not?
Through the mayor, so I can't presuppose how that's exactly going to play out on paper. I will say that I know the mayor and I and the treasurer and senior staff, we recognize that council has a meaningful role to play in this. So how we assign that on paper, but still line up with the legislation. Best is you're going to have to give us the summer to figure out how, based on experience, that will best look.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. And through the mayor, yes, I'd like to thank you for the presentation. Definitely appreciate that. As part of the presentation, you indicated about the financial powers that they cannot be delegated at all. However, in terms of the powers that were there, you're indicating that the duty and responsibility is to present the budget and to approve the budget. So what you were saying with Councillor Davidson here about not presupposing how that may all come about, I'm trusting that we could probably, this is possible scenario, would be that we would continue to have our committees, budget committee, continue to work collaboratively towards getting a budget together, but it's the mayor who's going to present it. Would I be correct in making that assumption?
Through the mayor, I think that is a very good assumption to make, that is the direction that it will likely go. As I said, most of this is how do we do this on paper to line up with the strict deadlines that are in the act about the February 1st and 30 days and how does this all fit together? I think you're right on the money, but how do we make this work in practice?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's all my comments. Thank you.
That's a good question. Councillor Shu.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for presentation. Before I ask question, I will make some comments. Based on my knowledge, the strong mayor powers offers tools to help mayor cut red tapes and speed up the delivery of key matters like housing and transit. I support this intention, despite the potential argument that regarding its impact on the democracy of the council. It's important to acknowledge that the mayor possesses the aspects of power, including the ability to delegate administrative powers. I'm pleased to see Mayor West's humble decision to delegate his administrative powers as it demonstrates respect for the city and for the staff. It's a good move that I really appreciate that. I have full confidence that Mayor West will utilize this legislative and financial powers on a fair and reasonable ground. That's all my comments, and I would like to ask two questions. The first one's maybe similar to Councillor Davidson and Thompson. Regarding the financial power budget, okay, the mayor is required to provide a proposed budget to council. So I just want to ask, what's the role of the budget committee then? So there's no longer proposed by the budget committee. So what will go next?
Through the mayor. So if you look at our process for budget approval today, staff table the draft budget at the Budget Committee of the Whole, the BCW meeting. BCW reviews the budget and may make changes. And BCW is then recommending that budget with any potential changes to council for adoption, right? So that's the structure. Under the strong mayor powers, that kind of flow through doesn't quite work as easily, right? It might. So I believe Toronto, the way they've done it is that, you know, and this is still, as I said, I'm not presupposing how this, they still used a budget committee. They still had council consideration. I fully expect that we will have the same thing. But how do we account for the approval mechanisms, the formal approval where you say this is adopted? That's what staff's concerned with right now, is how we put on paper those processes that still, as I said in my presentation, and as the mayor made very clear to me, meaningful consultation and interaction with all of council on the budget. Stay tuned. In the fall, we will come back with some recommendations on how we can do that.
So as my understanding, that means the procedure will remain the same to a certain extent, but the committee will still work with the budget chair, but how they collaborate, okay, with the process, that will be uncertainty, and we are just trying to figure out, and there's no decision at this moment, right? There's no clear picture now, right?
Through the mayor, there isn't quite a clear picture.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say that as many of the structures that exist today, staff will recommend that they remain in place. But we might have to add some extra paper, some documents to the process to align with the legislation. I don't want to presuppose everything. This was announced a week and a half ago. I have never had to learn legislation as fast as I have today, or more complicated legislation than this. So bear in mind, I really wanted to get in front of council today to talk about a high level overview, simply because they come into effect on July 1st. And this does impact what happens at our council meeting in July. And if I suddenly am throwing on the website mayoral decisions without providing the information, but bear in mind, we don't know how this is all going to sort itself out, but you know, I can pledge that staff are looking this based on the mayor's request. How do we meaningfully maintain what we have today in view of these powers?
Thank you. My second question is, how about deferring a decision? Can mayor has authority to defer a decision without needing the consent and the vote from the council?
Through the mayor, deferring a decision, if I might, in what respect, like the passage of a bylaw? Perhaps, so I'll use that. So no, the motion to defer a matter would still be a normal procedural matter within a council meeting. So council on a majority vote can pass a motion to defer. The veto powers or the legislative powers are concerned with the process by which bylaws get approved, formally approved, finally approved, and or vetoed, and then approved. So the legislation, actually probably the most complicated piece of the legislation that we're trying to figure out, and this is actually taking flow charts, is that the deemed passage date of bylaws is not necessarily the day that council voted on that bylaw. So currently when council, similar to this meeting, council is going to vote on the bylaws at the end of this meeting, and I'm assuming they pass. Then the mayor and I will sign those bylaws. and they're passed as of today. And if there are planning act matter, we have to give notice, the 15 days notice perhaps as of the passage date today. Well, that might change all with this veto power, right? Because under the new legislative powers for certain bylaws, the mayor has 2 days to think about it, whether he likes that or not, in theory. And to approve it, take no action, in which case it automatically approves, or consider vetoing it. So the mayor's not deferring the bylaw. The mayor wouldn't have the authority to defer a bylaw. That's a consideration of the matter. That's a council motion to defer. But whether the bylaw comes into effect, it's a technicality, but I apologize if it's not clear. It's not the clearest thing out there.
It's a good question. I actually hadn't even given that any thought. It's probably one of the many things that we haven't thought about. But at the end of the day, we all have the ability to defer, refer, whatever. And I think under my understanding, and now the clarification, my understanding of this is that the ability for any of us to defer or refer something that we're discussing is equal, in a council meeting. So
It's very interesting. Is it possible to have a scenario that you veto and 2/3 the council and just oppose you, and you veto, oppose, veto? This is never ending looping. Is it possible?
Thank you. Through the mayor, it's a great question. And I will be honest here, I'm not sure. I can only give you the process as we understand it today. I think procedurally, if a meeting was being held to override a veto, well, you've got at least probably a majority of members of council who are engaged in that. You need a majority to defer something, right? So it's these are the procedural questions which, hopefully I never face in practice, but we'll certainly give thought to as we look at our rules.
That's all my question. Thank you.
remember I said that we would try not to be exciting as a council. That would be exciting. So let's not do that. Okay. The next speaker is Deputy Mayor Chan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and Mr. Kirk. Thank you for doing the work. As you said, lots of learning. Something as, scenario, depending how it play out. I just want to have a number of questions to seek clarification. I know primarily we're dealing with the municipal level with the procedural clarification through updates of procedural bylaw, because the provincial government has all the power, not only with the legislation, but it looks like it's already stated in the regulations, 58020, state of everything. To your knowledge, is that anything that maybe either yourself or city solicitor, although let's slide 5, the 4 different priorities, including housing, or to support housing, I should say, under the provincial priority set out, does that also have room that under regulation, maybe there are additional provincial priorities may be put in? Perhaps through chair, maybe a city solicitor, maybe appropriate, or city clerk will know. Thank you.
Thank you. Actually, through the mayor, I can certainly answer that question. The government can amend the regulations whenever it wants and add additional priorities. In fact, if I might just point out, this whole part 6.1 of the Municipal Act leaves open a lot of room for regulatory making by the government that would change how the process happens.
Thank you. So I think that's before we all get excited here, and the other 25 municipalities now get additional mayor powers. Is probably more to come, and those might not be the only issues. That's my note, and I appreciate Councillor Shield was asking that question, because I previously was thinking about what if potentially that mayor exercise veto and council 2/3 veto, and where it's going to end. I mean, so I'm not going to touch on that since have been answered. The other thing too is that in terms of timing, I know the act itself has under royal consent. The rec is now published. So does that mean it is actually in effect as of now? So you, Mr. Chair, in terms of is it really in effect as of now, or is it until July the 1st? I'm not clear. for you, Mr. Chair.
Through the mayor. So the regulation hasn't been published yet.
It's not been.
I have not. We're waiting. I'm relying on the minister's announcement saying that this would come into effect on July 1st, and the minister's proposed regulatory posting on the Ontario government saying that they were going to do this. I have seen nothing to suggest that this will not be in effect as of July 1st.
Okay, thank you. Because I believe 2 weeks ago when the premier announced it, I believe July 1st was mentioned.
Yes.
So it's not yet in effect. So that's point number one. And point number two is actually, I think at least 3 mayors now, Kitchener, Waterloo, and Cambridge are saying very decisively they are not going to exercise this. But it's not the same as opt-out, right? As like the City of Ottawa did. So it's something of interest. The other thing too, I was just wondering that I appreciate our Mayor West in here already have a discussion engaging our clerk to state clearly a number of these administrative powers will still be delegated to council. And I, for one, appreciate that because I think working, regardless of what we have, working on consensus is great. So I'd like to move the recommendation to receive the clerk's presentation, not only for information with thanks, but more to come because I'm really looking forward to when the, I guess, updated procedural bylaw to come back, perhaps spell more of those process changes after it become the whole regulation become actually in effect after July 1st, because it seems that not just us, I think the province are also doing some learning. If you get, I don't know, if more than 3 mayors of the new 26 ones are saying no, and who knows, right? That's something would change. Mayor-elect of Toronto also apparently said she's trying not to use it as well. So thank you very much for the opportunity to offer comments and see some clarification, Mayor West. And I put the motion to receive with thanks.
Okay, I mean, I think we made that very clear that you can't say no, it's a reality. It is on the ground. So I'm not actually sure what you're talking about because the ability for us to put our head in the sand and pretend that this doesn't exist is not a thing. And I've made it very clear that I don't intend to use it unless, very unforeseen and unusual circumstances would happen. And I don't see that happening with this council. So, okay, Councillor Silovitz.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to our clerk and his staff who must be working very hard on this. Appreciate everything you brought to us today. There's still some things that are sort of foggy, troubling, and it's probably going to play out as it plays out. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions to you, Mr. Chair. Again, with regards to the budget issue. So, and I know you may not be able to answer this, so I don't want to put you on the spot, and it's kind of been asked or answered before, but does this mean that we will still have budget discussions amongst council like we've done in the past? Because those are incredibly important, and I know that Mayor West is very much aware of that.
Through the mayor, what I can say is beyond what I've already said, the legislation actually does suggest that there should be discussions of the budget at council, whether that's just to amend it, but it implies that there's discussions about the budget. I can say that staff, the mayor, and as my presentation, I wouldn't have put it in there. I wouldn't have used the word meaningful consultations on the budget if I didn't think that that's the road we were going down. So there will be a role for council to play for sure. That the mayor has been very clear that that's what he wants. And, and I think staff, we recognize that. So it's just how this all plays out and aligns with the rule is not as clear right now.
Thank you. I think we can all thank God that we have the mayor that we have sitting in that chair. It's just a couple of other things to you, Mr. Mayor. where is the public in all of this? It's all about a mayor's decision and a council who can then veto, but then it can also be vetoed back. Where's the public in all of this? And you may not be able to answer that, but
Okay.
it's a kind of like a vacuum here.
Through the mayor, so there is no prescribed process for public consultation on the mayor exercising any of their authority under the act. There is no prescription for that. That being said, and once again, please forgive me, this is very early days. I've had about a week and a half to learn the most complicated piece of legislation I've ever read. The legislative power, and we've talked about vetoes, only because I didn't want to go down this road, but I think it's important that I go down this road. There is a rule within part 6.1 that talks about the mayor advancing business related to the provincial priorities. Well, the question we're having that, if it's building housing, then we're probably putting into effect the Planning Act. Well, how does this all work together? How does the public get involved in this? And these are questions that remain to be answered. I would say that, if a mayor ever uses the veto power, I feel like I'm on a game show every time I say that, veto power. The public's potentially involvement is if there's a council meeting to consider whether to override that veto. Then the public would have the ability to do that. The public, I'm sure every member of council up here realizes that the public's engagement with council is not just within this forum, that probably the greatest amount of engagement is with you individually or as a few by email and other correspondence. I think that's where the public's involvement is. The public will not be blind, as it were, to this, because accountability provisions are built right in, and any mayoral decision will be done in writing and will be posted on the city's website.
Thank you. And one more question. So through you, Mr. Chair, to our clerk. So the bottom line is that the bylaw must always comply with the legislation, right? So we can't have a bylaw, we can't propose or approve a bylaw that at the very bottom line is not in compliance with this legislation.
Through the mayor. Okay, so I think there's a difference I recognize that this is clear as mud some days, but there is a difference between proposing and enacting a bylaw by council vote and approving a bylaw. There's a difference under the strong mayor rules. So council has the right, subject to any legislative rules, to enact any bylaw within its power and authority. Council, the mayor could, and I'm doing a hypothetical here, then you could have a bylaw on the agenda and the mayor can say, this interferes with the provincial priorities. I'm not going to vote for it. Well, the majority council here could vote for it and it still passes the council meeting. It's still enacted. But it's when does that bylaw come into effect? So there's approving a bylaw at a council meeting versus, passing a bylaw at a council meeting versus approving and that bylaw coming into effect. And I apologize if that is as clear as mud. These are the things that the clerks and myself are wrestling with. And the most complicated piece that we're seeing from a process perspective and bylaws is the part 6 talks about, despite any other act, a bylaw is deemed to have been passed. So it's not necessarily the day that council votes on it, subject to a whole bunch of things. And, and that's the part that we're trying to figure out, right? Because I have statutory responsibilities to do certain things with certain types of bylaws after they've been passed. Well, it's after they've been deemed to be passed. So I mentioned earlier that, we've recommended, and the mayor has certainly agreed, that as part of the signing of the regular bylaws for council meeting, we're going to have a one-page document on the top of there that says, I approve all bylaws passed at this meeting pursuant to the part 6 of the Municipal Act. so that we know that those bylaws are, regardless of Part 6, deemed to have, or because of Part 6, deemed to have been passed at the same meeting. It's a sort of a cover your butt sort of scenario to, so that some, very, amazing lawyer doesn't then go argue at the Ontario Land Tribunal that, well, they didn't comply with their notice obligations because the notice obligation. So that's where we're at.
Thank you. I also just want to really publicly thank the mayor on slide 17. Under your next steps, the mayor has notified the clerk as of July the 1st, he will make the following delegations. The power to establish committees will be delegated to council. The power to the appointment of the city manager will be delegated to council. So again, we're keeping that status quo. The responsibility for the city's organizational structure will be delegated to the city mayor. I cannot think of anything more important to retain its status quo. It is the city manager who knows what our organizational structure is. So it's very good that that's kept separate. The only other thing I wanted to say is just listening to you and listening to everything else that has been said about this and what I've read, there's a red flag here that I hope the public and residents of all municipalities understand. And that is that if there is a mayor who sits in the mayor's chair who has authoritarian views or wants or needs, a municipality or a council is going to be in serious trouble. So in other words, the chain of office of mayor can either weigh heavily on that mayor, or that chain of office can be used as a very heavy weight to exercise that particular mayor's control over a council, which is also duly elected by the public through an election process, whose rights now, with the Strong Mayors Act, may have been somewhat diminished. And I suppose that's something else that we will learn as the process goes on. But the bottom line is, unless you have a mayor that respects process, that respects his or her council, you're going to have members of that council who are very much diminished in what they can actually do for their residents. Just wanted to say that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Regional Local Councillor DePaula.
Okay, so thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm encouraged to hear that in general, the status quo is, is attempted to be maintained, and that there's a lot of paperwork required with this new legislation simply to maintain the status quo. And it's not as simple as not acting. It's that you have to actively get in there and say, I don't want to use this power every single time. So I just have a question with regards to the difference of the legislative and administrative powers of the strong powers of the mayor. In the preamble, or it seemed that these powers can only be used to when there's a need to forward those provincial priorities, i.e., planning or building more homes. But then with all those administrative functions, is it not then required to explain the reason that it relates to a provincial priority when it comes to budget? If the mayor says, I'm going to appoint a new city manager, I'm going to dictate a new hierarchical structure, and I'm going to draft the budget and bring it to council, and they can have a look at it, and if they approve it, great. If they don't approve it, I'm going to veto their decision. Like, that's the extreme of what's being allowed here. Do you then have to put in writing some justification as to why your decision is helping to advance provincial policy?
Good question. Mr. Hike?
Through the mayor, I agree. Excellent question. Best understanding of the legislation is no. What I call the administrative powers, so the committees, city manager, organizational structure, or the financial powers, and those are my terms to distinguish between the parts of the legislation, are not tied to the provincial priorities. Now, they don't have to be exercised according to the provincial priorities. The mayor does not have to be of the opinion that an organizational structure must be changed to meet the provincial priorities. That's
Okay.
not in the legislation.
Okay, so well, very, very different from the way this was originally described and unveiled. So when it comes to a veto, though, an explanation need be provided, and that explanation has to relate to provincial priorities?
Thank you. Through the mayor, yes, absolutely. So the exercising of the veto, so the legislative power, or even the advancing of business related to provincial priorities, has to be tied to the provincial priorities, and the mayor who is exercising those must give written reasons. So as to why, in their opinion, it's connected or it fetters or whatever the provincial priorities. Yes.
Okay, so and then just one final question, and you don't have to give the long drawn out perfect answer, because I know that might come in time, but is the mayor able to delegate those authorities to a body, to the budget committee, instead of the legislation seems to allow him to delegate to a person, but can they delegate essentially the budget process to the budget committee? Can that just happen?
Thank you. Through the mayor, that's a great question. So no, the financial powers actually aren't something that can be delegated. They're not one of the powers. And that's why, I'll be honest, the reason why I'm presenting these as legislative, administrative, and financial powers, besides the fact that they are tied to those kind of functional aspects of the municipality, the legislative and financial powers cannot be delegated to anyone or any body. Only the administrative powers can be delegated.
Okay. So the administrative powers then can be delegated to, say, council. Could they not delegate to council the responsibility for which would maintain the status quo?
Through the mayor. So the administrative powers, if you talk about the administrative powers, as I put them to you, are the appointment of the city manager, the establishment of committees of council, and organizational structure. Those can be delegated, and the mayor will be delegating those. The approval, so the approval of a budget. So this, so regardless of the process to get there, the approval of the budget cannot be delegated. In fact, the legislation says that, if the mayor presents a budget by February 1st and council doesn't take any action within 30 days, it's deemed adopted.
Okay.
So it talks about deemed adopted. The legislation talks about deemed adopted, right? So you can't delegate that power to adopt. But as I've said, the mayor and staff are very aware of the mayor's desire on this, is to ensure that council has a meaningful say in the final budget that is deemed adopted for this municipality for each fiscal year.
Okay, I got it. Understood. I guess it's just a lot more paperwork. I mean, the mayor can prescribe that things play out any which way, including the way they are today. But the legislation requires that at the end, the mayor's sole decision maker, really, or well, with administrative, and then the veto bonus game kicks in after council makes decisions. Okay, thanks for the clarification. I appreciate and understand how difficult this must be coming down as quickly as it has, and I think over time, with the help and all the expertise of the 27 municipalities that are experiencing this change, I think we'll get clarity, and I think it's going to add nothing more but another layer of bureaucracy, really. Okay, that's, the way it seems right now. Thanks very much, Mr. Clerk.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else? Okay, so let me make a couple of comments. First of all, thank you everybody for the discussion. I think it's been a good one. We've had many good questions, actually. In fact, some of which I haven't thought of, and I think maybe even Mr. Hike has not thought of yet. This is all happening in real time. I do want to say, though, that when all this came down a few days ago, I did make a point of putting out a press release and especially sending that to all of members of council. So I appreciate the support. I think I made my position at that time fairly clear, and my position still stays relatively the same as we learn more. The details of how this is all going to go down are a little bit more complex than I expected, but we'll get there. I just wanted to start off by saying I've always really believed that, any sort of a strong servant leader collaborates. And we all know this because this is what we do as servant leaders, and we are all servant leaders. That I actually find that very inspiring in this job, to be able to work with great people that, give input. I don't have all the ideas, but I think everybody else collectively probably does have all the ideas. And that's the principle that has guided me, and it will continue to be the principle that guides me. So I will say that, we are there to represent the public. The public gives us input in many, many forms all the time. And we get that input. I get that input. I get that input through them. I get that input through you, and that will continue. So that's the overarching principle. I think that the decisions, in my experience, even before being on council, in volunteer roles that I've had and other roles of leadership, is that the decisions that we make, that we actually go out and look for input and get input, are the ones that are the best decisions. They're the ones that if everybody can buy in, or a lot of people can buy into the decision, those are the decisions that the community is most proud of. So again, that's something that we're going to continue to see. The goal that we all have is building a great community. And we are at a time right now of pretty significant upheaval, significant growth. And I think more than ever that I've been on council and studying the history of Richmond Hill, this is one of those defining times where we need to stay focused on that goal, and we need to be bringing people together, not, being a dictator and pulling them apart. So I'm actually very proud so far in this term of council, the way we've operated. We've done what we said we would do. I hear that from the public all the time. And this change is not going to upset the apple cart. I'm focused on the goal, and I know all we are as well. So I appreciated the words meaningful role that Mr. Hike has used, that him and I have talked a number of times in the lead up to this presentation. And that is what I want to see happen in this council and in everything that we do. We are all elected individually by the people. It would be an insult, under any sort of even remotely normal circumstance, to not respect that role. Okay, so that's basically, I think I've made myself fairly clear on that. I did want to, again, thank Mr. Hike for the technical presentation, because that's what it was. I mean, it was very technical and it's way more complicated than I ever expected this to be. And we've been seeing this decision coming across the horizon now for quite some time. And now it's here, but it's a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. I just wanted to talk quickly about the budget, because the budget is an incredibly important thing. My goal with the budget is to make it as close to status quo with regard to the principles I just spoke about at the beginning of this talk as possible. So I'm not going to unilaterally recommend a budget and then say that's what it is, because that would be ignoring a huge amount of resource that we all can collectively bring. And, in all the years that I've been on council, the budget process is actually one that it's the longest, it's the hardest, it's the most back and forth. We have sometimes have the most heated debates. But at the end of the day, most of the budgets, or at least the general spirit of the budget, we typically can all find common ground and say, yep, this is what reflects the wishes of the community. So we'll work through the details, but I can assure you that we will be looking to do that. And as for the delegating the power of hiring and firing the city manager and delegating that power to hiring and selecting great executive leadership staff, that's a no-brainer for me. That just needs to be delegated. The city manager, as far as I'm concerned, works for council, and that needs to be the same. We need a staff and a city manager that we all can work well with, and we frankly have one now. And so I think that's the part that I'd like to for sure see stay the same. That's just a no-brainer. Anyway, we are, excuse me just for being a little bit over, but we are at this point, as I said earlier, we can't ignore this. It's a reality as of July 1st, but I think we move forward in a positive way. And, and again, I want to just assure everybody that we need to continue doing what we're doing. We need to be building the houses that need to be built. We need to, and the provincial priorities, we typically all agree with the provincial priorities. So we were going to do that anyway, I think, for the most part. And that's what I would like to continue to see. And I'm pretty sure I'm very sure that's what our community wants to see as well. So is there anybody else for a second round? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Through you, the mayor. You had indicated, obviously this is very, very broad, what is laid out in front of us. And I'm trying to figure out, is there actually anything that would not necessarily be considered under the provincial priorities, because that is pretty broad. Because as Councillor Silovitz had pointed out, under a different mayor, we could have a different situation where, the mayor could put their arguments together, the reasons why they want to veto something, and spin it in a way to say that meets with the provincial priorities, when perhaps it doesn't, or at least other members of council may say that's not a provincial priority. So I guess the question is there any mechanism in there that deals with how to determine whether something is actually a provincial priority or not?
Through the mayor, that's a great question. The short answer is no, there's no mechanism within there. In fact, the legislation is quite very, very, very interesting here when it talks about the mayor in the mayor's opinion. And then I'll leave it to my friend, the city solicitor, to talk perhaps about the indemnification part, which is, I don't think I've actually ever seen an indemnification of a mayor that's as broad as that, or essentially. So I think the short answer is there's no mechanism in here, and probably the only mechanism might be a court or tribunal, but yeah.
Sorry, so through you, Mr. Mayor, there is one provision in legislation in terms of the immunity provision as 284.14, so that any powers, or whether it's a veto power, a decision made, or other power exercised legally and in good faith. So it appears that there'd have to be a bad faith argument in terms of overturning it. Shall not be quashed or open to review in whole or in part by any court because of unreasonableness. So presumably there's no argument in terms of on a reasonableness standard. So it would have to be something that is done in bad faith in terms of overturning any such decision under these new powers, under the immunity section. So I think that's the question in terms of, is there any review of these powers? There is one provision, and that would be 284.14.
I think, like you said, it's all clear as mud. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Davidson.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So we know that the province said no when it was proposed that there'd be guidelines if a member of council, including the mayor, behaved in a way they could be sanctioned or removed. That's not going to happen. You're elected for 4 years, no matter how you behave. It seems to be so even if there's no legal, say a mayor did something that the rest of council thought was outrageous, their only line to go and try to fix that is an integrity commissioner investigation, right? There's no real mayor tribunal or, bad mayor behavior judge or like, there's just nothing with teeth, right? As soon as you elect a mayor or any one of us, unless we're in jail, there's really, for some other reason, there's really no mechanism to remove someone, no matter how good or bad their behavior. Is that accurate? Because that's the way it is now. So I'm assuming with these extra mayor powers, there's nothing new there.
No, I don't think there is anything new there. And honestly, this is a separate issue that we have talked about on this council in our endorsement of Bill 5. Bill 5 got shot down, but it is my understanding that there is other legislation in the provincial, coming from the provincial government that is going to address this. And as a matter of fact, I have a meeting about that coming up, that we're going to be advocating for something. I mean, if it's not Bill 5, it's got to be something that does put guardrails around behavior of elected officials. But no, this has nothing to do with the strong mayor powers, or there's nothing new in the legislation that I know of.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, so we've got a motion to receive the presentation and moved by Regional Local Councillor and Deputy Mayor Chan, seconded by Councillor Tree. Did you want to speak or? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item on the agenda is was pulled by Councillor Shu, 15.4.1 season winter maintenance review. So Councillor Shu, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I would like to express my appreciation to the staff for conducting the review and for their hard work throughout the past winter season. While the data provided in the report regarding complaints, timelines, and costs may not present an ideal picture, I understand that efforts for service improvement are ongoing, and I have summarized the feedback and the suggestions received regarding snow removal services, particularly concerning windrow removal from the city. So to address this concern, I would like to propose a motion to amend the recommendations. And I once reinstate that this amendment requests that the staff provide a comprehensive review of the windrow program, exploring ways to enhance its effectiveness and efficiency. It should also include an assessment of options and the associated financial implications to be presented before next year's operating budget process. So yes, this is on screen. This is my amendment, and the wordings are fine. And I recall there was a staff report in 2019 that explored various options for windrow removal services, such as outsourcing and exclusive service for seniors and disabled residents. I believe it's necessary to conduct a similar survey again, considering the potential big cost differences now. So that's my rationale and also my reason to amend this motion.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. I think that's well worded and very reasonable. Is there any? I need a seconder for that. Okay, Councillor Davidson, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. Can staff confirm that such an internal review would be done in an impartial way? Because I mean, obviously, we're looking at things that could potentially affect the way we do things in the future. How can you just tell me briefly how something like this is done when you're looking at an internal thing that's already going on? What's the process quickly?
We do internal reviews quite often, but Commissioner?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I would agree. We do internal reviews often, and we would do our best to be impartial. We actually have already had a conversation about whether this might be best done by a third party or in-house. But if we wanted to use a third party, we would have a budget request in probably this year's operating budget to do that. but we do believe we could do it in-house.
Thank you. And am I allowed to ask questions about the report here, or this is just about
No, this is
the
the-
amendment?
This is actually
motion.
very similar to the staff recommended, sort of recommendation, except that we've got an addition to it. So yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Can you just tell me one exact number for what the windrow has cost to date? And then figure out annually what it costs. That is the acquisition of the equipment, the special equipment, the overtime, the staff hiring, the everything to do with this program. Is there a magic number to tell us what we've spent on it so far and what we're expecting to spend annually for as long as we've agreed to have this program? And I'm only asking that because I've heard pieces.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So that is not that easy because the number, so you're asking for a number specifically for the windrow program, but what was actually funded by council was called the Public Works Operations Enhancement Program. And they're two distinctly different things. So breaking it into the two pieces, I would have to give you a lot of assumptions to go along with giving you one number. So you really, I can't just give you one number and say that's it. If you ask something more specific, like what is the amount we spent to purchase the equipment, then I could give you a number, but not for the program as a whole.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I think that taxpayers would like to know that number, like what every year, all in. What does it cost us up till this point, and what is it going to cost us every year, all in? And perhaps that could be part of this review, because people do ask me, how much does this thing cost me? And I think we have to get it down to that, including every single aspect of this program. I hope that's possible to untangle and somehow include a ballpark number even, so we can make decisions about programs, whether or not they're worth the money. We have to know what they're costing specifically. So thank you. The other question I have is about salt. In Ward 1, we see a lot of salt. And frankly, I honestly just anecdotally see more salt than I've ever seen, especially on cul-de-sacs. I did have an opportunity to talk to, this was a few years ago, I had an opportunity to talk to a plow driver. He's not a staff member. And he told me that since the windrow came into pass, they use more salt so that they don't have to put down the blade, because when you put down the blade, you create a windrow, and that their direction has been put down more salt. Let's wait to the last action. Maybe we don't have to put down the blade as often because there's a whole new program now with windrow that generally didn't have anything to do with the plow company. Do we assess how much salt we use? And do you know if salt use is in any way affected by the windrow program?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to ask our manager of roads operations, Diogo Oliveira, to respond to that.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, the windrow program does not have an impact to how much salt is being placed on the road.
Okay, thank you. So there's I know you can't speak to just I heard, but so there's no efforts to try to there's no extra efforts to put brine or salt down any more than we did before the windrow program to avoid having to send out plows. It's the same protocols we had in terms of salting and brining streets as we had before the windrow.
Through you, the chair. Yeah, that is correct. If anything, we've actually expanded our brine program where we only did bridges, and now we include all our primary roads.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Okay, thank you so much. Regional Local Councillor Deputy Mayor Chan.
Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First, in terms of the recommendation in front of, or motion in front of us, I certainly would support the C, which was discussed, I guess the intent last week, but now is more, in my view, more encompassing, that a number of options, not just looking at one single one as what we talked about last week. And on that note, perhaps this is not so much a question. I would like to see as a comment so that staff will take note. through Mr. Chair is that comprehensive review of the rental program would look at also the situation about those driveway fronting onto regional road. I think I raised that last week. The ones that I know for sure is on 16th Avenue. And they pay taxes like everybody else, but at the meantime, they unless they're seniors, I don't believe they receive the rental program benefit as any other people have driveway fronting onto city streets. So one aspect. The other aspect is that perhaps it could be a question now through Mr. Chair. How's the winter maintenance in terms of those laneway? I'm aware of, for example, in maybe at least one in Ward 3, but maybe there's a private one. But in Ward 6, there's a number of laneways around the Bandry, Red Maple area. And through you, Mr. Chair, perhaps your staff, any particular potential in terms of timing from a priority clearing standpoint that could be considered in the future, or staff feeling that is now at this point in time relatively satisfied with the I guess the number of hours after clearing the major primary street before they clear? Because I remember, I don't know about Councillor Shield, when I was the local Ward 6 councillor, quite often I got complaints about that the laneway is almost like forgotten and sometimes may not get plowed even maybe a day or two after the big snowfall. So perhaps the question through Mr. Chair is that has that laneway clearance also be a consideration in either, to be considered through you, Mr. Chair, to Commissioner Steele, to the extent you can answer.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So the laneways are the lowest priority right now because they are the least used roads. So they do get plowed very last, along with some other types of streets. So the current service level is met routinely. So I'm not clear exactly what you're asking. Would that be reviewed as part of the report we're doing?
Well, I'm glad to hear the answer. So just I'm saying in response to C, or in relation to C, if that's consideration of anything further, I'm glad to hear that has been a priority, but any further improvement, or also just the idea is not to lose thought of regional driveway as well as the laneway. That's my point. Thank you very much. And I'm glad Councillor Shield is nodding as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in support of the motion in front of us.
Hold on one sec. Is there anybody else in the first round? Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much, through the mayor. And I do thank Councillor Hsu for bringing this motion together. I can support it as is, although I think everybody knows that I was definitely not in favor of this windrow program right from the get-go. So when I look at this motion now, it's only talking about a review in one direction, and that's towards enhancing the program. Whereas if I was looking at a review, I would probably want to see, are we getting value for money? Should we even be in this program? That's what I would be looking for in a more comprehensive review. But I recognize that we've only been at this for a few years, and that and technically we're still in its infancy. So, that's probably me just suggesting that, I'd rather get out of it sooner than later, but at the same time, maybe I need to give it a chance. So I will support it, but those are my comments.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'll just make a couple of comments just very briefly. We've had a long conversation about this at the committee of the whole, and again today to some degree. I appreciate that, and again, thank you, Councillor Hsu, for putting this forward. I appreciate the fact that this is open-ended enough for staff to do what they need to do and give us their very best recommendations, which we would always desire and expect. I think, as I said at committee of the whole the other day, I mean, snow is definitely something that we're we see in Richmond Hill, and it is a real inconvenience for everybody. And I think it is important. It's a crucial service that we offer, and we need to be doing it the best that we can do. And even in my term in my time on council, I have definitely seen efforts from staff to make improvements. They're not, we can't make Mother Nature time when the snow starts and when the snow stops, because that is a definite problem with snow removal. But I think we need to be doing the best that we can. And I think this is a good way for us to be taking a close look at it through staff and through the technical analysis that they'll do to make sure that we're doing the best that we can. So Councillor Hsu, did you want to wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chair. In addition to the amendment, I would like to make a few recommendations only verbally, okay, not an amendment. Take it easy. Firstly, I suggest not providing specific time frames to the residents that indicates when the job will be complete. By avoiding such commitments, even if there are reasonable delays in the service, we can prevent false expectations among residents. Because promising specific hours sets an expectations that we may not be able to meet, which could lead to the embarrassment from the city. Also, considering that we have 4 new members in the council this term, it would be beneficial to organize a special education section to familiarize the council with the operation involved in the windrow removal. Even better, including a site tour, if possible, is even better. By gaining a better understanding of the work process, we can make a more informed judgment and provide a clearer explanation to our neighbors. Although it would have been ideal to hold this section before the last winter season, but it's never too late to arrange it before the upcoming winter season begins. That's my another recommendation for a special education section for the coming winter season. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tree, you've got your hand up. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Through Mr. Chair to our commissioners, I know this is really tough job is we are mentioning the snow service for many years. And last week during our public meeting, I raised up a few questions, also sent a bunch of emails regarding to the residents' concerns, also recommendations. Also, I do have some follow-up emails I will send you regarding to maybe enhancement of the service level agreement, or including the equipment upgrading. For example, for now, all the windrow services on the street, we don't have those wings. Can we consider install the wings, etc., or maybe route changes? For example, now we only have one way. Can we have multiple route changes, etc.? Those things. So also another suggestions here is regarding to the expectation. So residents do put a lot of expectation for city staff to enhance the snow services. I think education should be there. I know we send flyers, notifications to our residents often through this email communication, the public communication. Maybe it's always a good way before winter comes, give them a heads up, educate the residents about what services or what expectation they are expecting, and what we can achieve, what we cannot achieve, that type of information. This way, the residents won't set up either high or lower expectation for our services. So I see we do have education process here. Maybe in the following year or in coming year, we can continue that service or education, and also the communication with more details. Since all the new members here, we add a lot of comments through the last year's winter, and better we put those feedback and also answers together and send out to the residents. That's my comments here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Okay, so we have a motion in front of us then, A, B, and C. All those in favor? Opposed, that carries unanimously. Okay, the next item on the agenda is 15.4.3, request for approval, Town Park Master Plan. And that was pulled by Councillor Thompson. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you. Through the mayor. I've said before, there's a lot to like about this this particular application or request for approval with the town park. But one thing did come to light from a resident during this past week, and I tried to look to see if this was in the report. I couldn't find anything in the report. And it's in regards to washrooms. So if we're making this a place for people to come and visit and be a part of all year round, one of the things is that quite often the Elginbarrow Arena is actually locked during the summer. So you can't get into those washrooms. Now currently there are washrooms where the ball diamond is. However, my understanding is that they are quite often locked at different times and not necessarily open all during, the warm weather times. It may only be when there's permits. I'm not exactly sure. So I'm just asking the question. I didn't see it in the report there. Is there something that will, make sure that those washrooms are open, during all the months of the year, I would surmise, and then also whether they're fully accessible washrooms as well. Thank you.
Okay. Was that a question directed?
I'm not sure which commissioner to send that to. I was looking at Commissioner Kwan.
Okay, go ahead.
It's an excellent comment through you, Mr. Mayor. I have staff available to provide you a little more insight as to how we've considered that issue. Maria Flores is on the line.
Okay. Ms. Flores?
Through you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the washrooms, that's something we can certainly take back. I do have Manager Dobby around as well, but I would note that with respect to the closures of the washrooms, safety consideration and normal operating procedures are always taken into account. So it's something we'd have to consider with the request to have them open all year. The other issue with accessibility, that's definitely something that is part of our standards. So any renovations or applicable things will be included. Page 27 of the master plan notes that there will be 4 seasonal washrooms at this point. And unless the 4 seasons, unless they can be made available elsewhere, again, we'd have to take the comments back and consider it when the time comes for the renovation.
Thank you for that response. The other thing that was also came to mind is that, a lot of people have a pandemic dog now. So I'm thinking that there could also be an opportunity here. So this is just a comment, not a question, but an opportunity to look at other options for dealing with dog waste. Right now, having, for those who actually scoop the poop and put it in a bag, they're quite often just throwing it into the waste receptacles, which is not the actual appropriate place for dog waste. So if there was an appetite to find a way to ensure that the dog waste could get to a proper waste method where it could be converted into energy or whatever, I'd like us to look at those options. I am aware of one particular company that does that and is being piloted by a number of other municipalities. So it's just, again, it's a comment that we should take a look at that and see if we could pilot where we're expecting that there will be a lot of people walking their dogs. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I need a seconder for that motion. Did we already second it? No, I don't think so. Okay, Councillor Shu. Okay, all those, is there any other comments? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you so much. All right, so that comes to the end of our open session. We've got 4 bylaws that we can pass. Can I get a motion to move all of those bylaws? Councillor Tree, Councillor Silovitz, all those in favor? That's 18-1 to 4. Opposed? That carries unanimously. Okay, we need a motion at this time to go into closed session. Deputy Mayor Chan, Councillor Silovitz, all those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Thank you. So we'll just go into closed session. We'll come out. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you. For the benefit of the public, just for the transparency reasons, council has adopted a motion to go into closed session to consider matters related to a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board in Ward 6. And this is pursuant to Section 239(2)C of the Municipal Act 2001.